The Shattered Hour Part 1. The Minute That Wasn't. The day the sky broke, everyone forgot the same 60 seconds. It was a clean Tuesday in late September, blue glass over Boston, brisk wind gnawing the river. Elias Grant left his office on Milk Street with 2 coffees and an inbox eating its tail. He blinked at the sunlight, felt the ordinary tug of a too-tight shoe, and then, nothing. The time on his phone jumped from 5:11 to 5:12 like a skipped stone. Traffic sneezed into honks and brake lights. A cyclist sat down on the curb and cried without knowing why. Seagulls hung mid-flap and then finished the motion, offended. By dinner, the internet had named it the Shatter, which was wrong and right. Nothing had shattered, yet everyone felt cracked. Elias didn't notice anything except a nausea that slid sideways in his gut and an echo in his ears, like the after-song of a bell hidden in his skull. He got home, set the coffees down, and watched one drift a fraction across the counter and stop. He put it down again, harder, as if the object had misbehaved. He chalked it up to a day with too many screens and not enough water. He slept badly. At 3:08 a.m., his apartment sighed, the building's old pipes exhaling heat like a pack of elderly smokers. He stared at the ceiling and counted hairline cracks that had always been there. At 3:11 a.m., the fly. It buzzed at his window and then at his ear, the tiny saw of a thing too alive for night. Elias swatted, missed, swatted again. On the third try he said, "Stop," which is not a word flies obey. The fly obeyed anyway. It froze in the air. Not dead, just paused, like a video with a bad buffer. Elias stared at the suspended speck, half a foot from his nose. He waved a hand around it like a mime with a prop. The fly didn't move. He cupped it gently in both hands, felt the muffled tick against his skin, and then flinched. The tick sped up to a furious thrum, too fast for a heartbeat, and the tiny body crisped like a forgotten raisin. He yelped, dropped the husk, and stumbled backward into his dresser, which obligingly wasn't there anymore. He fell through a space that contained his dresser last time he checked, and landed in the hallway just outside his bedroom, one arm whacking the framed map of the city he'd never put up straight. A mug on the dresser inside shivered and then slid 2 inches toward the edge, reconsidered, and stayed. For a long blink, he smelled oranges like it was Christmas when he was 7. Then the world was itself again. Hallway rug, morning breath, the murderous fly reduced to dust on his hardwood. He touched his cheek, expecting blood. There wasn't any. His fingers tingled. His tongue did too. He didn't go back to bed. He sat on the floor until 4:31, watching dust in the streetlight, testing little things with little words. "Pause," he said to a houseplant. The plant did nothing, because plants always do nothing on human timescales. He tried a fruit fly he found circling the sink. Slow, the fly complied, the air around it thickened, a droplet of syrup hanging from Time's lip. Faster, he said, and hated himself for how obedient the universe became. The fly burned through weeks in a heartbeat, then was a fleck. He whispered, "Reverse," to the fleck, and nothing happened. He tried again. Reverse, like an apology. The fleck didn't rebuild into a fly. The past didn't want him. He showered and shook. By sunrise, Elias decided 3 things. He could freeze and accelerate time for living things within a radius he could feel like a muscle in his chest, a halo that stretched about as far as he could throw a baseball. He could step from one point to another inside that halo, skipping the space in between. It wasn't disappearing. It was like remembering a door that had always been there and using it. Words didn't matter. He wasn't commanding with sound. He was pushing with something older. The words were for his fear. He went to work and failed to touch any of his spreadsheets. He paused a mosquito in the conference room and then unpaused it because guilt is not species specific. He left early. That night he tried it on himself. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror with a mouthful of toothpaste and held his breath. He thought, hold, and the stubble in his reflection stopped being stubble in any meaningful sense. It didn't grow, didn't gray, didn't do anything except manifest today. He felt the mechanism like a thumb holding down the edge of a page so it wouldn't turn. He let go after a minute, and the minute that should have happened to him slid past into the sink. "Okay," he said to the mirror. "Okay." He didn't sleep. He wasn't sure he needed to anymore. On Friday he was mugged. It happened with theatrical timing under the overpass by the river, where the city collects people who have given up and people who want to rearrange that fact by force. Elias walked the wrong block with the wrong face on and the wrong headphones in. A kid in a red hoodie stepped out, a second kid flanked, and then a third with a box cutter grinned wide enough to make a bad dentist rich. "Phone," the third said, with that appetite for a fight that is always a hunger for anything. Elias handed it over because he wasn't a moron. The kid took it and said, "Wallet," and the scene got committed to a film Elias didn't want to be in. "Can I offer a counter-proposal?" Elias said because stress made his mouth write emails. They moved at him. He held out his hand without knowing he would, and they slowed down. Not freeze, just syrup. The drag of a dream where you run and your limbs are arguments. He stepped past the box cutter and around the second kid and took his phone back as if they were uncles playing a trick. He didn't touch them. Touching made the ability harder to hold. He stepped backward 5 feet, no step, just there, and let time breathe again. They belly flopped into normal speed and crashed into each other like bad luck and pride sharing a hallway. "What the red hoodie said, inventing religion. The box cutter turned and saw a man who was not where he had been. Elias didn't feel heroic. He felt nauseous again, like he'd swallowed a balloon full of electric. "Don't," he said, and the box cutter didn't, because the blade hand had suddenly aged to an old man's shake, just for a second, just long enough to make instinct re-edit itself. The boy stared at his own fingers, suddenly certain of bones. Elias ran. He didn't teleport. The body needs normal sometimes. On the river bridge, he leaned over rusted iron and laughed until it tried to become crying and failed. He stopped time for himself and let the city river past. Cars wrote lines across light. A gull froze with its attention like a dealt card. He breathed. By Sunday, the shatter had collected explainers like barnacles. Solar storm, underground particle accelerator misfire, secret government signal, global hypnosis. People reported small miracles and larger mistakes. A woman in Manila could taste lies. A kid in Marseille could shout and make wood soft. A baker in Cairo could make yeast rise too fast and then stop forever. Most of them faded after a day. Some didn't. Elias slept 2 hours and woke into a body that felt like a draft, like he could blow out of it by accident. At the market, a child fell from a cart. Elias stopped her fall like a glass he wasn't ready to lose. He reversed her half a second, only half, enough to put her feet back where her feet had been. The mother looked around for the hand that had saved her baby and saw only Elias, red-eyed and ordinary, panting like he'd outpaced a train. "Thank you," she said in a dazed voice. "How did you—" "I'm a gymnast," he lied, and the child looked at him like she would remember his face in a decade and tell someone he was a magician. That settled one direction his life could have gone. He wasn't ready to walk into it. Monday, he went back to his desk and lasted 7 minutes. At minute 8, he typed a resignation email that was a poem about insurance and stopped reading it halfway through. He closed his laptop, left his key fob on a frowning plant, and stepped to the street without using the door. On the sidewalk, a man in a gray suit with a cut that said television turned as if he'd been waiting for him. "Hello, Mr. Grant," the man said, as if intros were for amateurs. "My name is Rowan Pike. I work with a group trying to understand emerging capacities. We'd like to offer you a job." Elias laughed the wrong way. "I've been unemployed for 9 minutes. "You'll fit right in," Rowan said, and handed him a card that had only a phone number and a fox embossed in the corner. "I'm not a superhero," Elias said. "I know," Rowan said. "They don't exist. We recruit adults." "Recruit for what?" "For Treege," Rowan said. "The city's about to get weird in groups. We try to keep it survivable." "Am I a cop now?" "Please don't insult me," Rowan said mildly. We're a network. We specialize in niche gifts. Niche, Elias repeated, and thought of a fly. You control time on living beings, Rowan said, like he was evaluating a rare tool. Not clocks, not cameras, not rain. People, animals, cells perhaps. You can step from A to B inside a range and make it look like you didn't. There are 5 million people in this metro, 3,000 reported anomalies, 100 that persist past a week, and perhaps a dozen we actually need. You're one. How do you know any of that? Rowan smiled in a way that made Elias want to preserve all his teeth. Because you froze a mugger and reversed a child and didn't hide. Because you wrote your resignation and forgot the part where you take the plant home. Because your building has cameras and you make them glitch. Elias held the fox card like it might scald. And if I say no? You won't, Rowan said. Because you already paused your own aging. And in a year you'll look 30 when your friends look 32, and you'll hate yourself for the first time. You'll need people who understand that problem when you start to solve it by other names. You're very rude, Elias said. I'm very on time, Rowan said, and stepped left and vanished. Elias didn't jump. He walked to the corner and found the man standing there, hands in pockets, admiring a bus that had a bent advertisement for a movie that would never be as good as its poster. Teleportation, Elias said, and the man shook his head. No, Rowan said, I'm very fast when people are looking somewhere else. You're not in your own network? I am my own network, Rowan said. You'll meet others. They are not all charming. Are you? No, Rowan said, but I am right. Come on. They went. Not to a base. Rowan wasn't the cape and cave type, but to a brick cube in Cambridge that pretended to be a co-working space. Inside, a woman was knitting with shadow. It looked like knitting anyway. 2 steel needles clicking through air like it had texture, and something black looping between them. In the fluorescent light, the black was less black than a value of absence. The woman's hair had gone white in those places where hair starts to mourn, but her eyes were street lamp bright. She looked up. Rowan, you found a time skipper. Elias, Rowan said. This is Noor Altaf. She leases darkness. That sounds illegal, Elias said. Only after midnight, Noor said. The shadow rope slithered into a tidy knot on the table. I can pull shadows into lines where the moon helps, not where electric lies. Tie things, trip things, catch a falling idiot. She squinted at Elias. You held yourself still this morning. Don't do that for too long. Brains like circulation. I'll add it to my calendar, Elias said faintly. Noor nodded at the fox card in his hand. Recruitment speech? A version, Rowan said. We need him. Everyone needs everyone this week, Noor said. But yes, you'll do. Sit, tea? He sat, drank tea like he was practicing being a person while his blood learned a new instrument, and let other people be stranger than him within arm's reach. That helped. By afternoon he'd met 3 more. Mika. A kid whose palms went slick with static. She touched your wrist and made your tongue tell the truth if both hands were on. Useless in a court, priceless in a hallway. Alonzo. Eyes like a good optometrist who could drag a pain out of your shoulder by looking, then put it gently in a paper bag and ask you to keep it on ice for an hour. He called it debt. Theo. A man with scars across his knuckles who could make paper hurt you from far away, not like bullets, more like 1,000 little decisions to be careful arriving at once. Paper cuts, death by bureaucracy. It should have made Elias feel safe. It made him feel invited to a catastrophe. By the end of week 1, the city had adjusted to a draft. There were new rules in group chats. Don't accept drinks from strangers. Don't stare into reflective surfaces if a man says he can steal your face. Do not, under any circumstances, antagonize the woman on the common who can hear intentions. She cried every day quietly with headphones on. Elias moved through days like they were heavier than before, and nights like they were light. He learned range and cost. He could freeze a person for 30 seconds without collapsing. A minute made his fingers sizzle. 2 minutes bled his nose. Slow was cheaper but trickier. People fought slow like they fight anesthesia. Fast was cruel and easy. His chest ached afterward like grief. Reverse worked on seconds, not years, until he pushed and the world gave him an inch. He held his own age at 29, like it was a coin he refused to spend. He did not think about what that would mean in 10 years. He thought about the near thing: a bus, a child, a woman's head turning. He saved them by a second and then had to sit on a curb while his heart returned anger with applause. He slept less. He started a list of rules in his phone titled, "Things We Don't Do." Reverse beyond 10 seconds on humans, we don't know where pieces go. Age animals beyond mercy. No guilt experiments. Hold your own stasis more than an hour a day. Nor's warning. Teleport blind. Stairs exist. Use slow/freeze on consenters without consent. Obvious, write it anyway. Treat the power like a joke. It is not. At the end of week 2, the first real ask came in. A hostage situation in a bank where a man who could make his skin like glass had decided that meant he was bulletproof and therefore God. "Are we police?" Elias asked again, even though he knew the answer. "We're paramedics for cause," Rowan said. "We get people out. We make space for ordinary cops to pretend the universe is normal." Theo's paper cut him in small obedience when he tried to move. Nor's shadow rope bit his ankles like midnight. Elias froze him long enough for his heartbeat to learn humility. The cops took the credit. The news said a negotiator was very persuasive. People went home, which is the only metric that matters. Word spread. Not about Elias specifically. About a kind of response that arrived when the city got the wrong kind of exciting. A rumor about a man who moved like a cut-in film. A text thread myth about a woman who could tie moonlight. A whisper about a boy whose glance made lies come out of hiding like mice. The internet did what it does, branded it. Patchwork was the name that stuck. Not a team. A quilt. Useful warmth. "Welcome," Nor said, late one night on the roof of the brick cube, looking down at a city that had failed to explode all day. "You're patchwork now." "Do we get jackets?" Elias asked. "Only scars," Nor said, and smiled with 3 teeth showing. He didn't ask about the other rumor, the one about a man who had not come to the surface yet, whose shadow walked behind events like a rumor that had decided to grow bones. He didn't ask because he knew a story when it was still sharpening its teeth. He knew, too, that time had decided he was a moving piece on its board now. He would either become good at the game or lose where people could see. That night, he sat on the edge of a roof and kept his own age in his palm like a coin and thought, "Not today." Then he put it back in his pocket and let the minutes happen to him. Below, the river hustled toward the sea like a conversation. Above, the stars pretended not to have noticed anything at all. He slept for 3 hours and woke to the smell of oranges again, as if a memory had opened a door. He didn't know yet that far away, in a room with no windows, a man who had been alive since before the city, had streets smiled at a map and said to no one, "We finally have an opponent worth etiquette."